Got another update for you, another video. For those of you last night, that saw the piece on the calendar, I just wanted to have one video on the calendar. I got some more stuff today, some more things I just want to piece together and share and focus on. Again, the focus on these particular holidays, okay, and the difference of what they represent and everything else. So what I'm going to do is I want to have a main focus that these things are God. They're not Jewish. They're not Christian. They are the foundations of this earth. The very simplicity of what was it, day 3, that God made the sun and the moon and the lights and made them for seasons, the Moedim, the appointed times. So the actual moon going around the earth and the earth going around the sun's axis, wheels within wheels, are the history of these things. They're not just, they're Jews, they're Old Testament, New. This is beyond, it's the foundations of the earth when time for our earth was measured first, okay? All right, so, a lot of this stuff it's so simple about time. And you may go through some things, you may even be angry about this. Like, why didn't anybody tell me this? This is so simple. Well, one of the things we have to come to terms with is the fact that, as the believers in the Lord Jesus Christ, we are part of the church. Well, it's actually the church that changed them. And so Daniel prophesied that there would be a man that changed the times and seasons. And they actually did that purposefully so that our calendar and certain holidays would not fall on Jewish holidays. It was actually, the whole Gregorian calendar is based on Easter not falling on Passover. So Easter and Christmas are entirely pagan holidays, and all of God's holidays are representations of the Lord Jesus that we should honor, okay? We don't do them to earn righteousness. Our righteousness is by His blood, but they are open gateways and portals of the glory that God is releasing from heaven, and He has done so before Adam and Eve were even created. So the reason you've never heard this stuff, or it isn't clear, is the fact that as you mention what day of the week it is, or the month of the year, if you do the history, the days are Greek gods out of Greek mythology and the months of the year. And so what that represents is thrones. So there's thrones on days, thrones on months that have dethroned God's order of things. So it blinds your eyes to the revelation of God's time. So the basic measurements of time are blinded from our eyes because we have beings sitting on thrones. So what I believe is happening, and I encourage you to get Ian Clayton's message on the Mazzaroth and the 12 signs, because he is dethroning and seating in these houses or thrones and sitting in the revelation and glory and restoring it. Okay? And so as people do that, the information comes downstream to us that we can tap into and say, wow, what God said is true, or this is how these things work, okay? And so that's what we're going to go over today, the importance of, when does a year start? When does a week start? Where's the Sabbath? Some things like that, okay? And so let me first show you like how, those of you that got this handout, a while ago, you remember that I did this as a depiction of the throne, essentially. And what I was doing is I began to observe one of the living creatures in the 4 faces of God on one living creature. And I was looking at that, and I put that on a page and realized that once you add him, and you take him, you put him in position, but then you add him with the other 3, that they actually look the same. So the same pattern of lion, ox, man, eagle is multiplied. So it's the same thing. So as you're looking at the throne, you're looking at the throne this way, it's, whatever the pattern is, lion, ox, man, eagle, as you're facing it. So what this 1 is now is 4. So what this is this is an equation of 1, plus 4, and it's a fractal. And so a fractal is a graphic representation of a mathematical equation, right? So I was just doing this to, come to grips with the order of God's throne. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And so keep in mind, guys, everything I'm sharing with you, this is how I got this. I didn't get this. I didn't look up someone on Google. This is how I got this, okay? This is how simple it is. But watch what happens. So you start with 1, you add the 4, and you always have the throne in the center. I was like, oh, that's interesting. What if I were to do it again and take a 1 and then, keep this pattern, but then add another 3, and another 3, and another 3, and another 3? Well, that's where you come up with this. And so this is, in the center, that same pattern. Right here it's just big, but if you reduce its size and then you put that there it is. And I was like, okay, well, let's add 3. And so it's like if you were to take this pattern and then you just move it up, you've multiplied. It's like cell multiplication, right? Just like, watching a cell multiply. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And so you move one there, it's like north, south, east, west. I'm like, wow, look at that. The pattern of the living creatures is now forming a diamond. And so now the 4 have multiplied into 12, right? And I was like, wow, what if I did it again? What if I took the pattern here and then started with another one and added another 3? Now, in order to do so, you can't do so on graph paper with the same size blocks. They don't fit. So what I did is I ended up reducing their size, and I said, oh, here's 1, and then adding 1, 2, 3. And then now you have the space to do that with each pattern. So I was like, oh, this is cool. This is like the living creatures, the wheels within the wheels. So it's like our solar system. You have the sun in the center, and then the planets orbiting around. You have God in his throne. You have the 4 living creatures. You have the 24 elders if you take the 12 multiplied by 2. If you take the outer pattern, 36, multiplied by 2, you have 72. You have the 70 elders. I'm like, wow, these are the courts of heaven. That's really amazing, right? So as you know, I gave you guys this, months ago, and keep your copies. Right now, my copier and scanner isn't working, so keep these and bring them to me. I will update them as a calendar, right? But the other reason I want you to keep them is you remember, when I was doing this, graphically, I lined up the pages. So I took the pattern and then I added the other pattern so that the throne in the center is the same. And so as I put a light behind it, you can see that the pattern is there on one side, and so that's the 4, and now you can see the pattern of the 12. And then you can see around it on the outside the pattern of 36. So you got 4, 12, 36. So again, this is a fractal. And so a fractal is all throughout nature. So if you were to take a leaf, any leaf, and you were to put it in the light, let's see if this will work. Not that great, but you have a center, center stem, that goes up, and then you have other branches, and those branches go into other branches, right? So a leaf, if you look at it closely, you'll see that it actually forms a tree. So this is actually what a bush might look like. You'd have a main branch, and then you'd have other branches on it. But that's not a bush. It's actually just the leaf of the bush. Well, the pattern and structure of 1 and multiplying that pattern of 3 or 5 or whatever the instructions are for that plant, they just multiply. It just does the same thing over and over. And so that's how God is so simple in his complexity, that he takes a simple equation, and so you can take a simple pattern in a leaf and you can get a tree. And that same tree is a pattern of a forest. All of it is working on a simple mathematical equation. And we can find some of those through fractals. So if you're ever interested in that stuff, there's amazing things on that you can actually, through computer graphics and everything, represent things in nature. So anyway, that's where I came up with this pattern. Then, as we're going through this week and the feasts and everything, I began to look at the significance and importance of this season, and I began to see that the black horse of the apocalypse, or Revelation 6, represents a season we're entering. Okay? And I'm like, wow, I wonder what if I put that on here? And I was like, wait a minute, this thing is a calendar. And it is. So that's what this whole thing is. But remember, everything with God, it's not like Greek 1, 2, 3, just, okay, this is the day of the week or whatever. It's alive. They are thrones. The throne is a calendar. Okay? And so they're alive. There are beings with personalities and life that represent each cycle and pattern. Okay? And so the living creatures have different representations and personalities and are alive. Okay? And so what they represent is a season. So we have 4 seasons of the year, and each one of them represents a season of 3 months. And so it's just like, like in business, you have a fiscal year and you report your earnings quarterly. Well, that's the same thing. The living creatures also represent finances, and that's what happens with the black horse. I was like, wow, the black horse, we're now going from the month of Elul into the month of Tishri, and we're not just going month, we're passing seasons, and we're passing into a time of judgment, a time of the scales. Remember, the guy on the black horse has the scales, right? So that's what I was like, wow, okay, well, what if I put that on, instead of, in terms of the throne, but what if I put this on a calendar? And it absolutely works. So basically, how it works, and again, what I'll have to do is I'll have to get your copy. My printer scanner isn't working, so I'll do this for you. I'll put in the numbers, I'll put in the math. But basically, when we start with the throne, we start with the censer. And again, all of our time is to revolve around the throne. And so living creatures are there, and then we have the 12 apostles, or 12 tribes, 24 elders. So they're all wheels within the wheels, and the God is in the center. So all of our time, all of the earth, all of creation is designed to worship God, and He is the center, right? So how this works is we started with 1, we added the 3, we have the 4, and then we add the 3, and etc., right? Well, what I began to realize is that as a calendar, as a mathematical equation, that this is, the 4 seasons, the 12 months, and the weeks. Okay? So if you, obviously if we start with, okay, let's say this is the first quarter here. In the first quarter, you have month 1, 2, and 3, right? And then from each month, so let's say this is month 1, from that month you have the first week. So you're counting, again, this block, or 1, and then you have 4 weeks, right? So you have week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4. And so now this pattern here is a month. And so if you add up all the outside ring, it adds up to 36. If you add this next ring, it's 12. So if you add 36 plus 12 is 48, right? Okay. But those aren't all the weeks of the year, as we know. Now this calendar, and what I'm going to show you guys, is pre-flood. Okay? Before, and Enoch recorded his calendar as having 360 days. And I'll show you how all this adds up. Okay? But what happened is there was a catastrophe on the earth, a major meteor, something that knocked the earth off its axis 23 degrees. And in doing so, it altered the seasons and it altered the time and added 5 days to the year. Okay? But what we're doing is we're just going to look at this in terms of pre-flood and God's original pattern in Genesis 1:14. Okay? So we have 48 weeks, but what we need to do is we need to add another 3 weeks. Okay? So if we take 48 plus 3, we come to 51. So we have 51 weeks. Now, if you take those weeks and you multiply them by 7 days and try and come up with the 7 days, 7 times 51, actually I have the math here, I'll do this on your sheets, is 357. Okay, so we're missing 3 weeks. Now we're missing 3 days. So if you add 3 days to 357, now we're at the 360. Okay, so we have 360 days. Well, what are the missing 3 weeks and what are the missing 3 days? They're the Jewish feasts. So this is before Adam and Eve is even created. Mankind is not even on the earth, guys, and God has already established this in the heavens. So these are not Jewish feasts. These are in the throne. And that's how I know this stuff, is because we know that the scroll I got on the house of David is a pattern of heaven. And so when we look at heaven, we look at the throne, we can find his original pattern, original instructions. So now as we add these 3 feasts, you'll realize that the Jews, the men in the Torah, had to appear in Jerusalem for 3 weeks out of the year. There's your 3 weeks. And then the additional 3 days are the other feasts, and one of them, unleavened bread and first fruits, overlap, where they're on the same day, so we don't have to add that day. So we have 3 weeks, 3 days, and bang, there's our 360. And this is just the earth going around the sun and the moon going around the earth, guys. This is not Christian. This is not Jewish. This is the throne, okay? So let me break it down and let me show you where it is. Okay, so as we need our 3 weeks, the first one that they had to appear is unleavened bread. Okay, so unleavened bread is the day after Passover. So it's the day after, and then from that day after, 7 days. The next one is Shavuot, Pentecost, or the Feast of Weeks. The men were to appear in Jerusalem for that. Now keep in mind, these there's also a significance in these in that they are also harvests. So the first fruits is the barley harvest. The Shavuot is the fruit harvest, various fruits. And the fall harvest is wheat. Okay, so that's the confusion with the Rosh Hashanah, is they're going by the harvest calendar. But this is not the pattern of the throne room. Okay, and we'll go through and we'll look at why. Okay, and our third week is of tabernacles. So the men had to appear in Jerusalem for those 3 weeks. So you add those to the calendar, bang, there's your 3 weeks. Now, what are the other 3 holidays? Well, the 3 holidays is you have Passover, that's on one day. So you have to add that day because that's not part of unleavened bread. Then during unleavened bread, within that, I think it's 3 days, because that's when Jesus was raised from the dead, you have first fruits. So that's unleavened and first fruits on the same day, so we're not adding that day again, okay? And then what we have is that completes the spring feast. Now we go into the fall, and we have what's coming up Wednesday, and that is the Feast of Trumpets, okay? So that's our second day. Our third day is the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur. So those are our 3 days, and those are our 3 weeks, okay? So if we add those up, we get to 360, bang. Those are the days in the year. That's your calendar, okay? Now, let me also go over the actual, so we know in the throne, we actually have beings that are there, and they also represent time in thrones. And so these are various court settings in heaven, and various times and various seasons. So now let me begin to break down to you the Mazzaroth, the Jewish Mazzaroth, and the mystery of the 4 stars. Okay, so within the Mazzaroth we have 12 signs, and again, those are the Jewish antiquity signs, not the corrupt ones in Babylon. That is astrology. However, the heavens declare His glory through every tribe and kindred and tongue, and the way God did that is pre-flood. I believe Adam, Seth, Enoch, and others had the revelation of God's glory and pattern. I mean, look, if you live for 900 years, you're going to learn some stuff, so they had enough time to learn, some things. But basically, they knew about these signs, and then they passed that stuff down. And so anywhere you go, all over the earth, they recognize these 12 signs. Okay? So it was a way of God's getting His message to the whole earth, bypassing mankind, bypassing anyone's ability to corrupt His message. Okay? It's the heavens that declare His glory. All right, so as we apply them to God's calendar, we can see how they work. There are 4, if you look this up, you want to Google this, they're called royal stars through the Persians, and they actually had a principal star for each season, and they would mark a season. They would not mark a solstice or an equinox. So for example, the star Aldebaran represents the constellation Taurus and the vernal equinox. Okay, so the first season is white, and the first month is Aries or Nisan, and so we know Aries is the lamb. So the year starts with the lamb, right? And the second month is Taurus, and Aldebaran is in Taurus. So what you'll notice is I have these stars, and I'll mention them real quick, but they go to the second month of each season. So we have the first month of the season, and the second month is marked by a royal star. So I believe that the living creatures represent that royal star and represent that season of those 3 months. Okay, so then we have thirdly we have Gemini, and where I believe that this connects to the first horse, or the white horse, is that he had a bow in his hand and a crown in his head. And Gemini, in many depictions, has a bow. Okay, and then if we go, and then what? So that as we shift so the year starts in the spring. As we go to summer, then we have the other cycle. And so we have below. I have here the Jewish month, and now we're in red, and the months are for the sign of Cancer, Leo, the lion, and Virgo. And so you can also see that the lion, ox, man, eagle is within the position of the 4 stars as well. Okay, and then the last one is Virgo. And sometimes you'll see, if you look this stuff up, that the year starts with the opposite of Taurus, or either Leo or Virgo. But again, that is in the wrong time of the year, just like Rosh Hashanah is the wrong time of year. Okay, so once we're in red, we're in Regulus. That's the predominant star, and the Regulus is in Leo. And now Aldebaran as well is right in the eye of the bull too, of the ox. Okay, so this stuff is pretty cool. All right, and so that brings us to black, and the black horse in Revelation. Remember, he's holding a pair of scales. Well, what's the first sign in that fall season? Well, it's Libra, scales. So all this stuff lines up. So we have Libra, Scorpio with Antares as the principal star, and Sagittarius. And again, I'll give you all this. I'll give all the months, the Jewish months, and the signs to show you everything that I'm describing. Fomalhaut is the star for Aquarius, and that is in the winter, and that would be the pale horse. Okay, so each horse and each season represents a court setting for that time, and we know that right now we're entering the fall. Okay, so so you can see within this we have God as the center, and then we can see the living creatures and how they're responsible for their various seasons, and they're all there, but each comes up as the predominant one in each season. Okay, so and the other thing is, remember before we were measuring the weeks in the outer ring. Well, if this is the first month, then that's the first month, and then this is the first week, second week, third week, fourth week. Well, the actual 12 constellations have things that are called decants, and they're other signs. So you have a predominant sign, and then you have a decant sign, 3 added to each one. And so that's what all this pattern is. And keep in mind, I just did this for the throne. I had no idea about the calendar. All I'm doing is I'm taking what I gave you guys months ago, and I'm putting names and numbers on the same thing, and it's a calendar. This is amazing. I mean, to God be the glory that this graphical representation shows you his true calendar and his true times and seasons. So God be the glory. Okay? All right. So the other thing I want to mention in terms of our measurements of time, so this is again predominantly a year, but then obviously we know, it also has weeks and etc. So is also to, recognize the Sabbaths. So the Sabbaths are the number 7. You have 6 days, and then the 7th day is rest. So you have 6 days and a week, 7th day rest. You have 6 years, 7th year, Shemitah, rest. And that's also what we're entering. As we enter Libra, as we enter the scales, we're entering a season where there's judgment taking place in the month of Tishri that on Day of Atonement that will not be done again in that setting for another whole year. So certain judgments are set in that month. That's why you see the black horse with the scales, and that's why you see the sign of Libra, is because things are weighed in the balance and judgment is set for a whole year on stuff. Okay? All right. So so the Shemitah is the same way. So basically you labor and then you rest, and if you do not, then it's possible you'd be subject to violation of God's laws, and that's what happened to the Jews. They were in captivity 70 years, right? And so basically that was 10 Shemitahs, right? And so God let the land rest for 10 Shemitahs because they violated these laws, okay? And then the Shemitah is 7 years, and then the last is 7 times 7 years, which is Jubilee. Okay, so again, there'll be another one I can do to measure a day, and it's the same pattern, and there'll be another one we can look at in terms of measuring years. Okay, but it's all basically the same pattern. All right, so so anyway, I know that's a lot of information. If you feel like going over this again, I understand. I encourage it. What I'll do is I can certainly give you. When you give me your copies, I'll have to change the numbers. The numbers I first gave you are different in order to represent this, most accurately, visually to the eye, and also to see the names of the months and the signs. So what's happening, guys, is we are dethroning the lies that have held us from God's timetable. And so in doing so, we will learn the truth and revelation of these important times, okay? And again, they are not Jewish feasts. They are things before we were even created, okay? So I hope you found this stuff interesting. I hope you found it a blessing. Again, to God be the glory. You may be angry. You're like, why hasn't anyone told me this? I mean, you can see how simple this is. You can see how simple it is graphically. You can see how obvious this is in terms of our days and everything else. It bothers me. I wish I knew this. I can actually track in my life the 7-year cycles, and I didn't make good decisions all the time, but if I had known about it, I might have made different decisions, But anyway, I love you guys. Thanks for listening to the video. I know that's a lot of information, but I hope you take it to heart and you take these seasons and this time we're in to heart and really seek the Lord, okay? So I love you guys very much. I bless you, and I'll see you soon.